All right, to get started, my name is Chris Widman, University Archivist at Special Collections and Archives here at Wright State. Today is July 3rd, 2018, and we're very happy to have Gary Hill with us here today, who we're interviewing for the Dayton Music History Project. Thanks for joining us today, Gary.
Thanks for having me.
And to get started, maybe if you could just share a little bit of your personal background, where you were born, where you grew up, where you went to school, that kind of thing.
Well, I was born in Dayton, and I went to Beaver Creek schools.
Okay. Might I ask when you were born?
1951.
1951. Okay.
So I just turned 67.
Beaver Creek schools, it was probably a little more primitive than it is now.
Yeah, I was on the Phil Donahue show because they suspended me because I had hair just a little bit longer than yours.
Really? When was that?
It was 1969.
Really?
Yeah, it was my senior year.
You got suspended for your hair.
Well, actually, it might have been 1968 because I believe it was at the end of the '68 school year, about in May, probably when I was on the show anyway. But the hair thing went on. I ended up graduating through a correspondence school because I didn't want to fight with them about my hair.
So how did Phil Donahue ferret you out for this?
He might have saw it in the newspaper.
It was in the newspapers.
And he was still out of Dayton at that point. So
yeah.
Then he moved to Chicago.
That was before he went national.
Yeah.
Nowadays, short hair is what they called long hair.
Right.
Then, yeah, that's funny.
The guy from Iron Butterfly was on the show with me, and he had, because Phil looked at me and he said, "Well, your hair's not as long as mine is." So.
And the guy from Iron Butterfly was on the show with you.
Yeah, and
my
mom was on the show, and I was back in school because the show was at 10:30 or whatever it was in the morning. So, so she was on the show live, and I remember this lady calling and said, "Mrs. Hill, how could you stand to sit across the breakfast table from all that hair every morning?" And she was thinking that he was the guy from Iron Butterfly was her son. I know, because she couldn't, with him sitting there with this shoulder with hair, it couldn't have been me that they were talking about.
So what was the connection with Iron Butterfly in Dayton?
I don't think there was any connection. I think he just brought him in just to talk about, he had problems,
right,
some kind of problems, and et cetera, et cetera. So.
That's funny. So you went to Beaver Creek High School. Where were your?
And they all. My American history teacher was so interested in that whole thing that he brought TV in so the class could watch me on the show, and I got to watch it too because of that, because it was on during his class. However, all the three principals came in and sat down right behind me.
Really?
And watched the show. and when you got the questions like, "Well, do you think it's really fair the way they suspended you because your hair wasn't like a military style cut like what they wanted?" And I said, "Well, it didn't seem to be fair." I'm crawling under the table.
Right. How long did they suspend you?
It was only like a day because I went ahead and got my hair cut at that point.
But then you ended up not coming back, or just or later on you just...
Yeah, that was that was there during my junior year, like I said, about the end of the junior year, and then my senior year I decided that I would finish up through correspondence school.
Right.
And then it was a year or two later they completely dropped the dress code.
Really?
Yeah. I think they decided they were getting into some legal
maybe they needed
trouble.
to change their approach a little bit.
Yeah. So maybe it helped accomplish something. Maybe
yeah.
It didn't, I don't know.
Local celebrity for a time, it sounds like. So So were your parents from Dayton?
No,
How'd your family
they're-
come to Dayton?
Well, they're originally from hills of Cumberland Gap, like the corner of Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia. And,
Okay.
Middlesboro, Kentucky is where they were from. And my dad was a country singer. He'd sung on the radio down, for some of those small radio stations down there. So,
Oh, neat.
growing up.
What?
And I I kind of learned quite a bit from him, and also I had an older brother that had combos and played like mostly instrumental type things.
Okay.
And so I.
So like bluegrass. Is that
He
how
played
you started?
a little. He played a little bluegrass and what they call hillbilly music, I guess. And my brother, that was my dad, and my brother played. He played more combo music like Bill Black and Teddy and the Rough Riders and the Ventures and that music.
Right.
So mostly.
So why'd your dad move to Dayton?
He moved to Dayton to work at GM.
GM.
Yeah.
That's a common theme.
Yeah.
Well, and we kind of, I always kind of come to this later in these interviews, and we start talking about how Dayton sort of developed its musical sound, and I think you just kind of touched upon it a little bit there.
Right.
A lot of people moving up,
Sure.
work at GM, Frigidaire.
From different
Yeah.
musical backgrounds too.
Yeah.
Sure.
So growing up, there was a lot of music in the house.
Yeah, it was naturally musical family. There was a lot of. Although my mom taught me my first C chord on the guitar when I was 12, I do remember that. So even before, Dad would show me a few chords, and he was a great singer. He was just okay on the acoustic guitar.
Right. Good singer though.
He had a real strong voice.
So how early were you when you first started? So music was just always around. in your earliest,
and one thing that helped me later as a recording studio producer was the fact that I remember I used to, when there was no radio, I kind of made a radio in my head. I'd be in my room and I'd start thinking about this Elvis song or Ricky Nelson song, and I would think. I'd start thinking about all the details and how it went through, and I was pretty young at that. I was probably 10.
Yeah.
And but I didn't really pick up the guitar until I was 12, and my brother had a Fender Jazzmaster laying around, 61 Fender Jazzmaster, and so this was 1963, I would say. Yeah, 63. I started playing.
Okay. You remember first song you learned?
Yeah, Memphis, the Chuck Berry composition that was a hit for Lonnie Mack from Cincinnati. It was an instrumental, and then the Ventures covered it, and I learned the Ventures record or version of it.
Right. So you're a big Ventures fan.
Oh yeah.
Sounds like.
Yeah. And also, well, obviously Johnny Rivers had the major hit on Memphis. So the song was like a hit 3 times.
Yeah.
Chuck and Ventures, or not Ventures, Chuck and Lonnie Mack.
Lonnie Mack.
Yeah.
So you talked about listening. Did you listen to a lot of radio?
Yeah.
Like where were you hearing music? Were there any programs you listened to, or stations, or?
Yeah, I listened to WING quite a bit, and as I got older and more interested in, like as I got into, promoting local recordings and things, then I really paid attention to the charts. And
Yeah.
And even on the very first gig I ever did, which was at Ferguson Junior High School, which is Beaver Creek Junior High, and we asked for permission to play, and they wouldn't give it. They thought, well, anyway, we don't want these 12-year-olds playing at the
12-year-olds, right?
So I went around them. I called Lou Swanson from WING, and I said, "You're the MC at the dance, right?" And I said, "Well, do you have any problem with us playing some music at that dance?" And, no, none whatsoever. Love to have you. Okay.
This is a junior high dance.
Yeah.
You're 12 years old.
Right.
How do you put together a band at 12 years old? I think I was just.
Well,
I think I was just learning to tie my shoes when I was 12.
the guy across the street played the accordion, and even though none of us were real excited about having an accordion player in the band, we thought, well, that's something.
Right.
And so we got him, and I knew a guy at school who knew a guy who played drums and that kind of thing.
So an accordion, you're on guitar, you have a drummer.
Yeah, we actually had two guitar players. So it's Lauren Patton on drums and Steve Young and Richie Gates on guitars and myself on guitar. So we didn't have a bass player yet.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten
I've heard that
polished yet.
I've heard that story before. Sometimes that was the last piece.
That's
to
why
come.
McCartney started.
Don't think I've heard the accordion making it on the band before the bass player.
Well, he didn't last long.
He didn't last long.
But he was in the original band though.
So you played at the dance?
We did play at the dance. We got there and we said, "What are you doing here?" "Well, we're on Mr. Swanson's show."
And didn't I say you couldn't?
He said, "Yeah, didn't we tell you that you weren't playing?" And I said, "Well, all I know is he told us to come on down." So they went to him, and they come back and they said, "Well, yeah, he says that they're playing." So they hated it. They didn't like it, and we were just so excited about playing. We weren't. I guess I was too pushy, obviously. But
How many songs do you guys have?
we had quite a few songs.
You had enough
I'd
to do a set? Yeah.
We actually did 2 sets.
Really?
Yeah, we did 2 sets. And now the one thing we didn't do was we didn't sing, even though we did some Beatles songs at that particular gig. And we played them as instrumental because we were
Okay.
too scared to sing.
Right. Right.
So-
That's understandable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess so. And then, we started playing some like Xenia Skating Rink and
You're saying that same band?
yeah,
Same
basically
group.
the same band except without the accordion player. And one guy bought a bass guitar.
Yeah.
And learned how to play bass. And later became a studio bass player and did real well in California.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you guys have a name?
Originally, on the drum head, it was because it was said the trade winds on the drummer's bass drum head, but it was actually, I can't remember if we actually called it this yet, but it was called the Vistas.
The Vistas. Okay.
And we did that for 2 or 3 years, and then everybody wanted to go kind of different directions.
Yeah.
So it seemed like a good way to meet girls.
That's always in the top 3
Yeah,
of reasons
It
you
is.
join a band.
it is.
Yeah.
As all the musicians I've ever met, most of them, if they're honest, they'll admit that too.
Yeah.
So
did you go through a metamorphosis in the '60s with as the hair got longer and the music started to change a little bit with the Beatles and
yeah, and I studied the Beatles very diligently. I studied their production and I learned all their songs, and a lot of times I would learn the bass parts and teach the bass player the bass parts, and because McCartney was getting more refined in his playing too.
Yeah.
It's funny how the music was progressing with us. We listening to better music, but it's also because the bands were getting better.
Yeah.
If you listen to the Beatles' first album, which they did in one day, or they recorded that entire album,
Yeah.
or to where they spent months and months in the studio, like on Sgt. Pepper and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And so everything in between, I studied, like with headphones on and tried to get everything I could. And then later on, when I got into Simon and Garfunkel and even the Carpenters, because not so much. I mean, I liked the Carpenters, and I thought they were talented, but I really liked the recordings. So I was trying to study how they
Right.
were making those recordings.
So that was something that.
And I'd write stuff down. I'd listen to through $200 headphones, and I'd say, wow, that's like what they did there. And I'd write that down.
Yeah.
And it was a good way to study. You couldn't go to school then.
Yeah.
Especially not locally.
Yeah.
They tried to get me to teach over a couple times there was a thing called, it was in Chillicothe, it was at a recording studio. It was a sound or recording workshop or something like that. Recording workshop, yeah. That was it. And a buddy of mine says, why don't you come down here and teach with me? I said, I still want to play.
When was that?
I was probably only about 30 then.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you ever done any instruction or teaching?
Oh yeah, I've taught guitar and taught vocal.
Where did you do that?
Just out of the home.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, and once again, I had offers to teach in different stores and things, but that wasn't my thing.
That wasn't what you wanted to do.
I'm a play-by-ear musician, so, and after, I'm sure I've done 10,000 recording sessions, and out of those 10,000, I would say 3 times I had to read music. But see
Really?
now, yeah, but it's a different market here. I mean, if I was in L.A., that it might be the other way around.
Right.
Well, 3 times I got to play what I wanted to play, and
Right.
and the rest of the time I was using the sheet music. So I'm aware of that. So, but most of the time in the local studio situation, a guy would come in where he'd beat out a song on an acoustic guitar, and the studio band would listen to it like once, maybe twice, and then we'd go right in
And try and accompany it.
and just work it out and try to make it more interesting, make it more like something on the radio.
Yeah.
And it was challenging sometimes, and the pressure was always there from the fact that the guy's paying a big amount of money per hour.
Right.
For the studio, for the musicians.
Right. So you got to get up to speed
Yeah.
pretty fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. You remember what the first record was you bought?
That I bought?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I see that. I think. Well, I remember the first song I sang was. Let's see if I can. Never felt more like singing the blues. It's a guy named Guy Mitchell.
Okay.
That's the first one I remember off the radio so much. Maybe 16 Tons, which was
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee Henry Ford, but written by Merle Travis.
Okay.
He was one of my guitar idols later. But the first record I remember buying was Ricky Nelson, Never Be Anyone Else But You.
Okay. So what was the music or the artist or guitarist or whoever who kind of made you want to play music? Maybe this was more influenced by your upbringing in your house.
Yeah, it kind of was. I mean, it's hard to say as far as I was already playing, but then the Beatles pretty well took over my life.
Yeah.
As soon as
So that made a real big,
that
huge
was
impact.
that was big.
Yeah. Okay. And you said you never took any lessons. or minimal?
Well, I didn't take lessons in the beginning. I was completely self-taught, but later on, because I wanted to expand my horizons, so to speak, musically, I took from a couple of great jazz guitar players,
Okay.
local guys, you know,
Right.
Jason Hollinger, and Terry Brads, both of those guys.
Terry Brad.
Terry Brads, he had a band called the 3-0, but he musically, chord-wise, he was at least on a level with George Benson. I mean,
Okay.
he was very, very accomplished. I mean, he played. They were all chords.
Yeah,
Chord
yeah.
melody. He just played it that fast. Yeah, he did. Yeah, so. And Jason Hollinger was in bands like Greenlight Sunday and some very famous local
Yeah,
bands. And,
yeah.
I took from him, took some, like I said, jazz chords. And he played on a famous record called Hey Conductor. That was Mark V. He used to play at the Diamond Club. And they recorded a Counterpart in Cincinnati. And he was like one of the first guitar players that played a real fast but good rock guitar solo on the end. It was on the end of that record, especially for a local guy. I mean, it was just really, really outstanding. So, I mean, that was considered. That song seemed like it was going to be a national top 10 hit, but they kind of dumped it because it would be. They called it a drug song or whatever. Hey
Really?
Conductor, yeah. So this is about. Whatever. But
Yeah,
there was a lot of that going on,
Yeah.
So,
Casey Jones and that kind of.
yeah.
Hey, Conductor. Huh. So you were playing with the
First it was the Vistas.
the Vistas. Who and you said these were some of your neighbors and friends that originally formed that
schoolmates.
band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And you played for
the
the
neighbor played the accordion actually,
Mhm.
and then the other guys probably lived a mile away, or something.
Yeah.
Um, and it's still nice. I still see a couple of those guys too.
They're still friends here. Still.
Yeah, Lauren Patton's the drummer, and he still plays occasionally, and then Steve Young still plays a little guitar. He's like a real estate agent, and I think in Beaver Creek, maybe Xenia.
Hmm.
So.
Was it hard to find people to play with, or were a lot of people?
There was a lot of people that I remember jamming with a lot of different people.
A lot of people that played their
Yeah.
their garage bands and
Yeah.
and
Yeah, and that's all we were really.
jamming around.
I remember when we started getting paid and we started making $10 a piece. That was wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
But we played teen dances over at the Wright Patterson Air Force Base, and as we got older, then we played the NCO club, and then we played the officers club. So yeah, it's kind of opened up as you got older. But,
So those original guys, did you continue to? I know some of them went different directions. Was there a core group of you that stayed together?
Not really. No, I mean.
You each found kind of different.
Yeah. Then my first kind of successful local band was called Captain Crunch and the Crew.
Yeah.
And
When we did the story circle, somebody said that, and everybody started cheering.
yeah.
Was it the name, or was it just a great band,
Well,
or both?
I wouldn't say it was a great band, but it was a good band. I remember.
Yeah.
I remember we played a private party, and over on Mad River Road for somebody. The people were fairly well off, and somebody was there and liked the. We did a whole medley of music from Sgt. Pepper, And they really liked that. They were impressed so much, they said, "Well, do you have any original music?" And I said, "Yeah, we do." And so they actually paid for our first recording session.
Really?
Yeah, somebody just was a guy named Ralph Winkler, who owned the Cinema East and Cinema South theaters, and also ran the I'm trying to remember the name of it, but the newspaper for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Okay.
I forget what the name was.
Yeah, I can't.
Skyrider.
Skyrider.
It's called.
Yeah. I think it's still.
It's still
I
going,
think it's
probably.
still a thing. Yeah.
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 And he ran that at that point, and he was a really super nice guy, and he backed that first record. I mean, I think it was originally $150, and you get 500 copies.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's including the studio time.
When did that band come together?
I would be. Well, there was two versions of the band, but the band that actually did something, did some things, was probably 66.
66?
Yeah, 66 and 67, 68, right in there.
So you were still pretty young.
Yeah.
Well, you were what, about 16?
Yeah, when we were about 16, they were actually playing that record on WING, and got it on a few jukeboxes, and et cetera, et cetera.
So was this a very Beatles influenced, British Invasion influenced, or what other kind of stuff did you play?
Well, it was.
How would you describe the music of Captain Crunch?
Well, on that 45 was different than this, slightly different than what we did. Even on that record, there was a lot of Byrds influence. I mean, because I loved the Byrds too.
Mm-hmm.
And, about that point, I still liked the Beatles, and went to see them in '66, et cetera, et cetera. Became a real big Byrds fan, and then it was the Yardbirds were the next big major influence.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that brought in Clapton and Jeff Beck and those
right,
guys.
and Cream and all that stuff.
That really opened up my guitar playing. and then Hendrix was next, so I mean, and then it was all listening to him.
It sounded like that was a time period where all guitarists kind of had to go back to work and really study and learn.
We can't just play that surf guitar now. We're gonna have to actually play.
Right.
Can't play dig 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 dig.
Yeah. You turn on the radio, you're like, get a load of this.
Yeah. Jimi Hendrix was completely different. It was like when this is kind of off the track, but one of my favorite stories is Alan Holdsworth he's by far the greatest guitar player I've ever heard. I mean, I've worked with some of the greatest in the world over the years, and I thank God for that. But he was just so great that even me being a studio guitarist for all those years, every time I'd see Alan, I'd work on his road crew. We became friends, make a long story short, and when he was around in this area, and if I could work it out, if I could either get out of the gigs I had or book around it or whatever, I would go help him. Because I wanted to be with, it was a chance to be with some of the greatest musicians in the world and learn from them up close.
Right.
Part of the deal is that I would, I'd help with the gear and stuff, and help him wherever I could, and then I'd get a front row seat, and I would sit maybe just a little bit further than you and I are apart. Okay, so even though I was a fairly accomplished guitar player, even the first time I saw him, which was 1984, he was so good that I'm just shaking my head and going, I can't figure out where he starts or ends. I cannot figure out what he's doing. It's just that far beyond me and beyond most people. And, I felt a lot better later when Eddie Van Halen said the same thing about him. He said every time I watch him, I keep thinking, okay, I'm gonna make the jump now. I'm gonna be able to tell what he's doing. No,
Right.
It took me about 8 times. It wasn't quite 10 or